A new Wordle puzzle is online. Click on the link to play.
Listening to the following video may give you clues. Please like and share the videos.
India's Modi calls for a ceasefire in Ukraine. India's Modi calls for a ceasefire in Ukraine, but what is his reason for doing so? The Indian Prime Minister is on a 3-day European tour, and his newly appointed Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Quatra said before leaving that he hoped to exchange perspectives on the issue and further structure and strengthen bilateral ties.
Let's look at a few of his other reasons as well. Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
The Prime Ministers of India and Denmark have joined their voices to demand an immediate ceasefire in the conflict in Ukraine. The two leaders also expressed their concern for the humanitarian situation in Ukraine and expressed their willingness to resume dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the crisis.
In Copenhagen, the two prime ministers also discussed the recent jailing of journalists in Hong Kong for their reporting. The incident has led to a fall in the country's ranking among the most dangerous places to work.
PM Modi's visit to Denmark will also be a chance to visit the country's vibrant Indian diaspora community. During his stay in Denmark, PM Modi will participate in multilateral and bilateral engagements.
Denmark has a large Indian community that is estimated to number 16,000 people. He will meet Denmark's Queen Margrethe II, participate in a multilateral business roundtable, and interact with the Indian community in the country.
Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. PM Narendra Modi on Tuesday met his Danish counterpart Mette Frederiksen in Copenhagen.
The Prime Minister stressed on the need for an immediate ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war and called for dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the crisis. The two leaders also discussed the Indo-Pacific and EU-India ties.
In her remarks, Prime Minister Frederiksen condemned Russia's actions in Ukraine and expressed hope that India will use its influence to persuade Russia to stop the killings. In an exchange of views, India and Denmark discussed the situation in Ukraine, with the Indian Prime Minister appealing for dialogue with Russia.
Frederiksen also called for the return of diplomacy between the two countries. She urged India to use its influence over Russia to help in the conflict.
However, this is far from a clear sign that the conflict between Ukraine and Russia is over. The two nations signed 9 agreements, including a landmark agreement on mobility and migration.
In addition, the two leaders reviewed progress on the Green Strategic Partnership and discussed renewable energy. The two leaders also discussed green hydrogen and wind power.
During the meeting, the Ukrainian conflict was an item of business. Denmark and EU leaders both condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine, while Modi and Frederiksen called for an immediate ceasefire.
Frederiksen and Modi stressed the need for a peaceful resolution through dialogue and diplomacy. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen met with PM Modi in Copenhagen on Tuesday.
They both emphasized the importance of bilateral trade and investments between the two countries. A robust economic partnership is vital to the prosperity of people in both countries.
Denmark is home to a vibrant Indian diaspora of 16,000 people. Both leaders will hold bilateral and multilateral engagements on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Indian diaspora. India's position on the Ukraine conflict remains steadfast and calls for an immediate ceasefire and a negotiated settlement.
It has reiterated the importance of a rules-based order and the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of nations. However, it is concerned that the Russian veto may impede the peace process.
China could potentially support such a resolution, while global emotions might turn against Russia. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also called for a ceasefire in Ukraine, and called for direct talks between the Russian and Ukrainian leaders.
He has also expressed appreciation to the Ukrainian government for facilitating the return of Indian citizens. These statements are the latest developments on the ground in Ukraine.
But India has much to do beyond expressing its concerns over the situation. The Indian diaspora and its government are actively engaged in this process, and will continue to do so until the crisis ends.
During his visit to Denmark on Tuesday, Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's call for an immediate ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. The Danish Prime Minister urged India to use its influence over Russia to help in the conflict.
The Danish Prime Minister also appealed for Putin to stop the killings. The United States, however, has not called for a ceasefire, nor has Denmark.
Both countries have offered their support to the Indian diaspora. India has also called for the creation of humanitarian corridors.
These are corridors that allow people and humanitarian aid workers to escape from conflict zones. These will serve as temporary safe zones for both sides.
The United Nations has defined these corridors in Resolution 45/100, which was passed in 1990. Further, it urges countries to work with Ukrainian authorities to create these corridors.
So far, there have been no reports of civilian casualties. Peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow.
Russia and Ukraine are holding talks on the issue of peace and security. The Ukrainian side has proposed a neutral status for the country, under which it would refrain from hosting foreign military bases and hold consultations with NATO guarantor states in the future.
A draft agreement could be signed within a few days, paving the way for talks between Zelensky and Putin. Russian presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky has hinted that the talks are progressing.
The two sides' positions on these issues have also been discussed in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. The talks began in Istanbul and are expected to resume there on Thursday.
While both sides have expressed their optimism, little progress has been made in the fighting in Mariupol. Russia has blocked aid into the city, preventing relief efforts from reaching the city.
In addition, there have been reports of counterattacks and humanitarian crises in the city. Despite these challenges, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he would reduce his military activity near the Ukrainian cities of Chernihiv and Kyiv.
In return, Moscow has failed to follow through on similar promises. Ukrainian officials have called for a ceasefire agreement and a resolution of the humanitarian crisis sparked by the Russian invasion.
A Ukrainian official called for an international security guarantee similar to NATO Article 5 to prevent further conflict between the two countries. So while Russia has made its demands clear, the Ukrainian government has remained firm.
Although the Kremlin may agree to sidestep Crimea, it will still have other demands for its peace and security. In return, Kiev may agree not to align with the West, but Putin will be sure to make other demands.
This means that any peace negotiations must be difficult, but there is hope. The next step is to hold talks between Kyiv and Moscow.
Investment opportunities in India's infrastructure sector and green industries. As India's urban population continues to grow at an unprecedented pace, there will be a high demand for infrastructure projects.
These projects will involve innovative technologies to improve transportation systems and enhance urban management efficiencies. India will face the growing challenge of water scarcity and unmet urban needs.
Further, the country's urbanization will occur in a disproportionate way. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal will be 60% urban by 2030 and only 40% in Kerala. The government is putting more emphasis on commercial price when investing in the Indian market.
In FY22, 35,000 crore will be allocated for COVID-19 vaccines.
It has also allocated 18,998 crore rupees for metro projects.
In the textile sector, the government has launched the Mega Investment Textiles Parks Metro scheme to establish world-class textile infrastructure in India. It plans to set up 7 textile parks in the next 3 years, with further investments anticipated.
The United States and India should develop comprehensive strategies to de-risk investment in the green transition and infrastructure sectors in India. The Government of India should appoint the Minister of State for New and Renewable Energy to lead the national process to identify the sectors that are most urgently in need of investment.
The Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change could serve as the lead counterpart in a consulting role. Across
the South Asia region, green buildings and transport infrastructure represent an estimated investment opportunity of $1.5 trillion by 2030. The development of these sectors will provide access to markets, boost trade and ensure mobility, and unlock private investment. Achieving these goals will require significant investments in the future, and there's no better time to take advantage of this opportunity than now. With a focus on these industries, investors can expect to see a steady growth in the Indian economy.